And we officially live. Welcome to Let's Talk Mentorship. We have our lovely guests, Nayeko and Cara, with us. But before we go to their bios, I'd just like to ensure that we press live for our Instagram audience. And thank you for everyone that is joining us here today. As always, we like to make this interactive and engaging. This platform is for you, for our esteemed guests. So make sure that you're engaged. It's an interesting topic. It's something that I think we don't speak enough of. And today we're really going to focus on navigating diversity and mastering cultural nuances for impactful mentorship. So we know that there's lots of insights on South Africa's rich cultural history as a start. And this really truly offers us a unique opportunity for deeper, more inclusive mentorship. So I'd just like to start off with giving a brief bio. And I told both our esteemed guests that if I don't do their bios justice, they are most welcome to just expand on it. So let's start with Cara Jean Peterson, currently the CEO of Phoenix, has been instrumental in steering the organization's mission of using crowdfunding technology to make tertiary education accessible and driving innovative ways to connect students to holistic support that enable a thriving environment and long-lasting social impact. And as we can imagine, lots of mentorship required within that context. So I'm very keen to hear Cara unpack how does this topic of today fit in there. And so now we go over to Nuyeko, founder and visionary at Procure Africa, which was recently recognized as a finalist at the 2024 African Supply Chain Excellence Awards. So congratulations, and we do need to also acknowledge Cara's recent accolade, which she can talk to some more. Pioneering digital procurement for Africa's progress, he is a passionate advocate for economic empowerment in Africa. His journey has been one of dedication to transforming procurement and supply chain operations, redefining these vital functions as strategic forces driving economic growth and development across the African continent. So without further ado, I'm going to go with Cara because it's the first, it starts with C. Welcome, Zebra Ignition Academy on the Instagram. And we're gonna kick off really, with the first question. How has navigated cultural diversity shaped, firstly, your own mentorship approach, and have you been the recipient of somebody that took that into consideration? We'll start with you, Cara.
Such a broad question, Aneesa. So I'm exceptionally committed, or for me, it's really important that you love what you preach. So if you're not practicing it, I don't think you should be able to speak to it, because I find it's better to speak from a place of experience. So mentorship has been very close to my heart since I can remember. So I was mentored during my days in high school, and especially as a young professional. It was actually when I was a student. Part of our course was to do an outreach program. So I was at UWC, and they had an HIV and AIDS unit. So we, as psych students, we spent 6 months with the unit where we coordinated outreach programs in the high schools in the Western Cape area. And their director, Mr. Joachim Jacobs, who passed away a few years ago, actually, he became my mentor. And when I graduated and I was looking for a job and stressing about how I was going to bring income into my family, because family tax is a real thing, he actually reached out to me and said, I want to create a position for you. I want to continue to nurture and groom you in your career because of the potential that I've seen. And so I spent a good few years at the UWC HIV and AIDS program, focusing on youth development, and just his understanding of where I was, and that I came as this young female of color who was exposed from when I was in primary school. I was in a very white-dominated environment, and being a person of color during that time, I always felt out, didn't quite fit, wasn't quite right. Something always felt wrong about me. And he knew how to understand that context and invest in me to get my confidence up to where I could live out the potential that he always saw in me. And so during that grooming process, I just really felt a sense of responsibility. Who am I to not pay it forward? Who am I to not invest back the way others have invested in me? And so that's really been a big part of my life's purpose, is how can I, through the people we hire, through the people I mentor, through the young people we invest in, through Phoenix as an organization and the work we do, how do we make sure that these people understand that they are investment worthy, that we believe in them, that there's someone backing them. And yeah, I think that's just kind of how I've approached it, is that someone invested in me. And for me, I feel very strongly about being available and accessible to invest in others. And so it's something I do in a personal and a tribe and work capacity. And even today, I still have mentors in my life, in different areas of my life. So spiritually, professionally, finance, get a finance mentor if you don't have one, really important. But yeah, fully believe in mentorship, but it needs to be a good match. You need to get each other and be aligned in values. It's not just about taking anyone because of their CV. You need to actually connect well and have a good solution.
Absolutely. And I mean, what I'm hearing you say in essence is your the fact that you're so passionately inspired to pay that forward because you were on the receiving end of it. And it's interesting for me that we're talking mentorship, but you find yourself in a space where you work in an environment where this is either the catalyst for people growing within those roles, or they can actually be left behind. So I want you to ponder on that. And then I'm going to come back to Nyeko to first respond to the question, and then just maybe think about those ways that it can either enable or disable somebody if they're not having that match that you're so referring to. Nyeko, over to you.
All right. I liked how Kara outlined her explanation, her response, and especially on my side, mentorship is about unlocking potential, and in most cases on my side, mentorship is structured. When we say mentorship, it means that someone has dedicated the time to help you, guide you, and enrich you through knowledge and that experience that they have. Um, but I've also witnessed mentorship as looking up to someone. You know, so as I was growing up, I would get introduced to different types of people, and I would actually love, maybe sitting in that office where my mother takes me to her workplace, and I would just sit in that office with one of her colleagues, and I would get to learn more about what they do, who they are in the workplace, how they got there, and I sort of took whatever they were telling me as a mentorship session, you know. And as I grew up, I noticed that I need to have more of this type of experience, and that led me to wanting to explore more in terms of mentorship. Now I want to get dedicated time. I want someone who's going to assist me in different types of parts of my life, and that led me to start reaching out. So once you start reaching out, it becomes different. You need to know who you're going to ask for that advice or for that help or for their time, and why should they assist you. So that had, it made me need to prepare myself in terms of what do I bring onto the table, what have I done for myself, and how can this person help me. So once that is established, that explanation that, okay, this is where I am, this is what I've done, and I believe if you now come in, you will be able to assist me and we will be able to go forward. And yeah, that's how I got to get into the mentorship space. In terms of cultural diversity, I've had wide diversity of people, mentors that have been assisting me in my journey. But at first, there was a thing of knowing where you are, your background, and being upfront, having transparency and being vulnerable to let the other party know in terms of where do you come from and where do you want to go, so that they know your expectations of them, basically. And with mentorship, you find that, okay, on my side, it's mostly people that are older than me, people obviously with much more experience. So I also see them as parents. you know. And they in that process of mentorship, it's like they will be treating you like a son or a daughter, and the advice that they'll be giving you, it's something that they can even give to their kids. So it's that sense of you're breaking out of your own world into someone else's reality, cultural background, and you're now learning and having a different experience. And you get to have that with different types of people, which is why it's very exciting to have a very cultural diverse mentorship network. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Nico brought up something so important. It's about exposure. So you need to be aware of potentially your own bias and where you are and some barriers that you could be creating for yourself, and look at other individuals and, kind of dig deep within your social capital and say, who gets the space better than me, or who can expose me to a different perspective? And do I respect the fruits of their life? I think for me, at a different mentorship webinar I did, we spoke about how to identify the right mentor. And what I'd said is, look at the fruits of their life, not their CV, not how great their LinkedIn looks, not how great they talk about themselves. Look at the fruit. Look at the actual fruits of the other people that they are mentoring. Or, they speak about a successful business. Do they have a successful business themselves that they can train you on building one? So looking at the fruit of someone's life and saying, do I want to produce those fruits in my life? And is this a good fit for someone that can expose me to their thinking and their challenges? And it's definitely a vulnerable situation that you're putting yourself in, because you're opening yourself up to someone else, to your own insecurities and self-doubts and where you need help. And sometimes asking for help is a really difficult thing, but you also need to show up and be committed. If this person is saying, I'll sit with you, I'll help you navigate this, but don't waste my time, like, then show up and be dedicated to it. And so that mutual respect and that mutual vulnerability is so important. And that's why you really need to figure out in that opening conversation, are we a good fit for each other? Do we don't have to come from the same background. You ideally shouldn't, in a way, because you want to expose each other to different. Because as a mentor, I learn from my mentees, and my mentees learn from me. We challenge each other on perspectives. It shouldn't just be a one-way relationship, for it to be as fruitful and impactful as possible. So yeah, I totally agree with kind of what Mieko touched on.
Yes. Now I want to respond to both of you, because there's a couple of things that's screaming at me. Okay. The first thing I'm going to go with was the last thing that you say. So somebody asked me also about, having a mentee and having a coachee. And because you're speaking about biases and that there needs to be common ground and that people need to show up with commitment and not just being interested, because there's an exchange of time and looking at the impact the person has made in terms of showing up, rather than that very attractive resume or credentials that they have. These are all very important. But at the same time, it's also acknowledging that we need to go with the no judgment lens. We need to go in with a curiosity and being open and willing to learn and grow and reach understanding within that partnership exchange. Now, in saying that, we've gotten very sophisticated. I mean, I know both of you from the Level Up program in the enterprise supplier development space, and I know Nieko on the De Beers Marine, both SIBA Ignition Academy programs. And obviously, Connect to Grow is the mentorship platform and program that SIBA hosts. On there, what I feel, what are your views and experience then on how the platform has enabled that the matches need to be secured in a way that you take the bias lens off? Because again, what you're seeing on the screen and how the system potentially matches you with somebody is not necessarily the only information we should make a decision on. We need to be quite discerning. How would you then say, has your experience been? I'm going to go to Nieko now. We'll do a ping pong between Nieko going first now to this question. How has your experience then been on the receiving end of the Connect to Grow program and platform, as being mentored or mentoring others? And one last thing, just a caveat, I always call it a mentor mentoring partner and a coaching partner, I almost feel like a visceral knot in my tummy when we say coachee or mentee, because it's almost like they are less than. So for me, the language is also quite important in how we exchange that relationship, and that there's no feeling like the one is above the other. So I'm going to leave you now to Nyeko to respond on your experience.
Yes. So with the Mentorship Connect platform, I think what actually stood out for me was the questionnaire that I had to fill up. Because I'm still looking out for mentors, and I'm also open to having a mentorship partner, someone that I can be able to teach and guide. But the questionnaire that I had to go through first, in terms of what do I need from a mentor, explaining myself, just having that detail where I'm outlining who I am, what I've done, which industry that I'm in, where do I need help, and what do I need from a mentor. So having that information outlined, I think it's the best thing to help us to connect, uh, you know, to someone who's looking to a mentor. So the mentor on the other side can easily understand what am I actually looking for. Are they that person that they can work with in terms of I'm looking for time. That is something that I always appreciate. Someone's time, whereby you can probably give me an hour or 2 hours per month, and I have my own schedule that I'd like maybe someone to come and play a part in, and having that outlined before the interaction with the mentor, I think it's the best. And I've received a few good um, you know matches, and I'm yet to explore them.
I love what you're saying there, because, if it is a reciprocal exchange, you need to be very clear on what is it that I would like to receive out of it, and not
Yeah.
just what do I take from it, because it is two-way. And I think there's a false belief that the mentor must just give us all the answers. But it's not, because there's lack of empowerment in that. Because how do you empower someone is not always giving them just your game plan. You need to start stimulating their thinking around it. So I love that your approach goes in that direction, because what you're coming with is a body of knowledge and a vision of where you want to take it. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to go over to Cara to respond to that as well, around her experience in the Connect to Grow world.
So I didn't work via the platform when I was a part of the Equitable program, but the way that but I'll maybe speak to what my matching process was like, and what that journey was. So at the time I had spoken to Bev. So I was working with Bev, and she was kind of overseeing the program and helping us to find the right mentors. So I remember having a conversation with her around, these are the things that I'm focusing on, these are the things that I'm new to and concerned about, but she said, what is the kind of the two most critical things where you would really want guidance and support in what formats? I said, well, for me, it's finance. I was recently appointed. At that time, I had recently been appointed, or being groomed to be appointed as the CEO of Phoenix, and it was a role that I was being mentored in by the now group CEO, and that was a journey over years. But I wanted a finance focus with someone that could explain to me numbers, not as a finance person, but as a everyday language. Because at the end of the day, I needed to be able to justify certain figures. It needed to make sense to me so I could set my team up for success, and look at long-term sustainability. So having those open, honest questions about what I felt were my limitations and where I wanted to grow and where I wanted to gain more expertise, but also the type of person that I felt I would better connect with. And I think, if we were going through an online screening process where you're answering certain questions, to just be really transparent about where you're at, what are your key focus areas, and what are your expectations. Because I think as much as you want to go in and leave space for it to be co-created together, you do also need to have some direction, or at least be honest with yourself about what what are your underlying expectations, so that you can have that open conversation with your mentor partner and see, do we connect? Can we meet each other where we at, co-create together, grow from there? And I'm someone that's a bit more structured, and so we were able to have a conversation to say, let's meet, for now once a week, because your needs are quite critical, and then we'll go into once a month and whatever. And then we ended up kind of connecting at different times over a span of 2 years, and he was absolutely phenomenal, and we got on so well. And sometimes it was in person, sometimes it was online, but be flexible. And prioritize. It's easy to be like, oh, I don't have time for this hour of this mentorship connect. There's so much going on. Like, respect that time. Like, it's important to both of you, and really respect it and honor it and show up. And the value is just, there's so much value in I think showing up for each other and showing up for your commitments and being true to your word. And that in itself is a skill that you need to coach yourself in. So yeah, I think for me that's the process that I followed, that I found worked really well, and that's kind of how I work now with other mentorship partners. Is we have an open, casual conversation of like, what do we want from this? Like, what is possible? Like, how often can we really commit to each other? We kind of just take it from there.
What I'm hearing also come through quite strongly is that the common ground needs to be also in the language. Right? And even if you come from you speak a different language, I'm not even referring to that. I'm talking even what you were saying. When you're mentoring me in finance, don't come to me and speak to me like I'm a CA. Give me layman's terms. And it's actually your responsibility as the person being mentored also to step up and say, you know what, I don't want you to come and give me balance sheet income statement in the context of how it would be in a finance course that I maybe need to write and pass. I'm wanting you to talk to me like I'm a man on the street, and you need to dumb it down, for lack of a better word, so that at least it's relatable and make it more meaningfully connected, so that you don't dislike it, so that there can be a different energy and like for it going forward. I see there's a comment, and I do want to acknowledge. Okay, so Winston Lawrence says correct. Okay, cool. So thank you. You concur with us. And Winston has been a long-standing mentor within the SEBA community. I mean, when I say long-standing, it goes back. I met him in 2007 and 8 when we were both mentors back in the day at SEBA Ignition Academy. So SEBA has really been instrumental in understanding the partnerships around, partnering people up with mentoring, and understanding the salience of that in the journey for both individuals that are in a work context as a student, but equally in the entrepreneurial landscape. So what I want to get to next is really, what are some of those key challenges that you both faced when mentoring across cultural lines, and how did you overcome it? And I'll give you an example where I've had to mentor students that's first language is not English, right? And it's very difficult, because the frustration that can emerge for that person when you're speaking in a different language, but not, or you're using words that are not connecting for the person, or you're speaking about concepts or frameworks without undermining necessarily the person, it can be quite difficult. But you both need to know that there's one common ground in place, is to get the person reaching that next level of whatever it is they want to progress in. What are some of those challenges? So Cara, I'm going to go to you first now. Just share with us.
So I'm trying to think if I've experienced any challenges, because I've been in mentorship, or I've mentored individuals who have been older than me, that have been younger than me, that have been, we've been of other races, same race. I think for me, sometimes what comes up, maybe even just family dynamics are different. So for example, I've mentored someone who was older than me and had a family, and I mean, I have a fur baby. I don't have my own kids yet, and that life comes up, right? Like, there's certain challenges with, with your children, or with managing a household. And that means that there's a different layer of understanding and flexibility around meeting times, or even the things that will occupy their space and cause anxiety that you might not be able to directly relate to. But I think that there's always a common ground in which you can connect. And I think one of the things that I see within the organization that I'm a part of and that I get to serve is that we come from such different backgrounds, different belief systems, different family dynamics, cultures, languages, but our vision is the same. Our core purpose of why we're here is the same. And I think having that golden thread is what keeps us quite united, and keeps us committed into showing up for each other and serving one another. And so that's translated really well into my mentorship relationships, is that we're both here for the same reason, because we want to share best practices, show up for each other, support, invest in, and you need to be willing to just meet someone where they're at. So what are they bringing to the table today, and you unpack it together rather than coming to other kind of preconceived desires or your own agendas. Like, meet each other where you're at. But yeah, I think in terms of that, just being aware of what is important to them as a person and what is might influence their decision making, and for you to be transparent about what is important to you and what influences yours. And then it's just about having really strong, open communication. And I think also just stripping out any kind of offense that might arise, to be like, oh, that was a trigger word, and then you're going to like chew on it or not approach it. Like, if they said something that triggered you, acknowledge it. Like, acknowledge it, speak about it, because they could not have texted where they understand it was a trigger for you. So I think that's why just being honest and open with communication is quite critical for the relationship to really be fruitful.
So I'm getting a few themes that's coming from that. Lead with empathy, no judgment. That's very important, because that's meeting the person where they are. And be generative in your approach in coming to a middle ground that will make that transition or challenge and allow you both to overcome whatever the barrier, obstacle, or challenge might be that's in your way. So important. We underestimate how we need to show up with empathy and no judgment, because by default, we are with our judgment lenses, unfortunately. And so when we put that down and we put down the ego aside, the triggers no longer become a problem. I have this thing where I say the triggers are our treasures, because that's in and of itself giving you the mirror to say, where are your biases that you mentioned earlier on.
Sure.
So it's beautiful to know that when you're triggered, what exactly are those biases? So over to our dearest Nyeko on this question. Any challenges, barriers, obstacles do you face? And maybe I'm going to stretch you a little bit, because what are some of those tangible examples that you can bring to the audience that makes it more relatable and real? And how did you overcome it, so that we can share the lessons? Because it's never a perfect partnership at the start.
Sure.
It's a
That is
growing
true.
relationship.
That is very true. So, meeting someone where they are is very important, firstly. But on my case, I've mentored people from different backgrounds, and that has a very big impact in terms of how one receives information or guidance. And sometimes, when you're trying to give someone, guidance, show them your perspective, they might not get it, or they might see it as something that is very distant from themselves because of where they are at the moment and where they come from in their background. So having noticed some of those types of challenges then leads to patience. You need to have patience with someone, knowing that for someone to see, I wouldn't say the light, but to see things in your perspective, you need to guide them in terms of, okay, take this step. Okay, before you can see the fifth step, at least see the second step, and step by step, they are going to be able to see your perspective in terms of, so because when it comes to mentorship, we mentor in different types of subjects. If it's personal life, maybe I mentor some boys who are about to complete high school, and now guiding them in terms of how they can go about, with their lives after school, in terms of varsity, if they are interested in entrepreneurship and all of those things, I can easily say, no, you must go to the university because that is where you're going to get a high standard of education. But maybe university hasn't been anything that is relevant to them at their home in terms of having uh, parents or anyone in the family who's went to varsity before. So that is totally irrelevant in terms of me trying to push that narrative to that person. Looking at grades as well, maybe they don't have the necessary grades to even qualify for school. So I have to meet them where they are. Okay, look, I still stand on saying that maybe you might have to go to university for you to be able to reach your goal. Let's say, okay, your marks are very bad. How can I guide you to say maybe next year go and improve on your grades so that you can move on to the next step.
Yeah.
So that also requires patience. Who are you hanging out with? Who are your friends? You might need to stop, hanging out with those types of people. But another aspect now comes in terms of what are they benefiting from those friendships? Sometimes it could be brotherhood. It could be people that they share their deepest secret with. It could be someone that even gives you a piece of a slice of bread, you know. So there are those types of things that now come into a challenge when trying to mentor someone, and looking at it at a bigger scale in terms of me being in a business space, being mentored by other people in terms of other mentors. It now comes down to where do I stand? Where am I in terms of finances, resources for me to be able to execute on the guidance and the ideas that you're sharing with me? So
Yeah.
those are the challenges, and I believe that patience is very important, and meeting someone where they are is the key.
I want to add
You want
actually
to
to something
respond?
that so there was something that Nieko said, which I've seen in my own family's life in terms of that exposure and challenging certain conversations. So my mom, when she was growing up, it was still during apartheid, so you were only allowed to study at certain universities unless you took this like bizarre module like Greek mythology, which was only offered at a certain university. So my mom ended up doing that so that she was able to study at UCT at the time. But the only reason she pursued tertiary education was during high school. A friend of hers who was white in my mom's college, she had said, are you going to study? And my mom was like, that's bizarre, because during that time, if you are a female of color, you go work for a bank or you have a family and you stay at home. Like those were the two options. And so a friend was obviously in part of a different environment. She was like, you should study. Education's pretty important. And then he brought it up with my grandpa, and he was able to like make a financial arrangement to send my mom to university. And that changed how she saw education, and she imparted that on us, that despite us having severe financial difficulties, the sacrifices were made for us to get a further education. It changed a generation. So I think that as much as when we connect with people from different financial circumstances or different backgrounds, you need to be willing to share your experience and your insights, but you also need to be willing to get in the trenches with them to help them. And I think that is something that you must, or something that like falls short of some mentorship partnerships, is that you're not there as an advisor, and it speaks to your language about that power dynamic. You're not there as an advisor, you're there as a partner. Are you going to show up and get in the trenches with them and help them? My finance mentor, he sat with me for hours and hours going through spreadsheets, looking for funding, looking for things, looking for tools, taking me through financial statements. He was practically doing, he wasn't like, here's the information, how are you feeling? Okay, I'll see you next month. So you need to be willing, and I think that can be a challenge maybe, is are you willing to get uncomfortable, get in the trenches with the person that you're mentoring? And if you aren't, then maybe you're not yet ready for mentorship, because it's that level of commitment. And you need to do it in a way where there's not an entitlement, there's not an expectation, and understand, again, it's that partnership. But if you're not willing to get in the trenches with each other, then maybe you don't have what it takes yet.
This is a very salient point that you bring to the table, because I was going to talk about our own transferences, because if we haven't sat in the trenches ourselves, if we don't know ourselves intimately, we very much can go into a projection and transference mode.
Mm.
So whatever our life experiences were, or how we were again triggered through whatever those experiences were, either in our former years, in our careers, in our entrepreneurial journey, we must be mindful that that transference as a mentor can go across, and which would not make you sit in the trenches and get your hands dirty, and hold that sacred space together alongside as your mentor did, because he could understand clearly this is what your need was. So how do we, I mean, this is a difficult one. It is something that we got to be mindful. Do you sign up to be a mentor if you haven't done your own inner landscape clearing or your work, so to speak? And how do you then make sure that the person that's in front of you has done their work? And if you're picking up that there's a projection, you being mentored, do you feel it's important to highlight that transparently to the person? Any one of you can jump up and respond to that question. This is not in the questions that we prepared. And I told you both, I'm going to go with your energy and your flow.
No, 100%. I was just like, are we still ping-ponging? So I don't mind going first.
Give it to anyone.
Cool.
Okay.
No, I don't mind going first. So I think for me, excuse me, from my side, what I think is really important is there's these two sayings that come to mind. One, you can't pour from an empty cup. And so you can't give what you don't have, or speak to an experience you haven't experienced. So be authentic about it. If you don't know, be honest that you don't know. If they're experiencing something that you don't quite know how to navigate, be honest about it. And so I think for me, it's really important. And even if your heart's desire is that I would really like to mentor someone because I think I have something to give here, then show up and be a mentor, but know it's going to take time and commitment, and you need to be willing to help do practical things to help that person based off of what your experience is. So if you don't know, be willing to find out together, right? Like there's so much value in that. And then the second thing is, in psychology, we have this thing where every psychologist needs a psychologist. So for me, every mentor needs a mentor. So if you're mentoring someone, you need to then also be willing to commit to another mentorship partnership and be willing to be mentored, because you will learn things from them that will help you navigate your own mentorship relationship. So for me, those are the two things to help that partnership.
Absolutely, and that's why I call it a partnership, right? Because there's the reverse mentoring that will take place in any way. I'm going to hand over to you, Neyeko, to share. On that response.
We constantly learn from our mentees to a lesser or greater degree.
Winston.
Most definitely, that is true. And looking within yourself first is very important, so that you know what you have in your arsenal. What resources, what experience have you had in the past, and does this person that is coming to you looking for mentorship fit those resources or experiences that you have? If it's something that you haven't experienced before, to help that mentorship partner is just to refer them to someone who has that experience. That would be the best way to assist them. Refer them to someone, and then they're going to get that assistance. And things like triggers, those are obviously going to come up in every relationship. I believe that's a given, whereby you're also going to learn more about yourself during that mentorship relationship, which you're going to be having with that individual, where they bring up something, and to you it was a bias, and you end up questioning yourself, having to go back and reflecting on that trigger point. And that's how it's supposed to be. It's a journey whereby we are always discovering ourselves through other people.
Love the discovery part, because it is a generative type of partnership. It's never a static, it's never set in stone. And what the person may have come to you with for that particular mentoring or guidance could expand into so many different directions. And I suppose that's where we need to be more open and flexible. Which leads me to the next one, which we have touched on in many contexts of this conversation. But how can mentors develop cultural intelligence to build stronger, more empathetic connections? So I'm going to go with you, Neyeko, and then we'll go back to Kara.
Okay, so obviously developing interpersonal skills is very important as a mentor. Knowing how to build relationships and keep a relationship with your mentorship partner is very important. And being not having a closed mindset, being open-minded,
Yeah.
being able to ask questions, and don't assume that just because someone comes from this culture, this is what they do, this is how they are supposed to be doing things. Being able to ask, so if it's religion, be open-minded, ask about it, celebrate when they're celebrating, because it's not really a big deal. It's just like having joy, sharing joy with each other. And yeah, just understanding, where they are. If they are making small steps, they're making progress in terms of what you're guiding them towards. Celebrate. If they are crying, cry with them, but help them to wipe their tears and just keep them going. So it's just that, friendship type of thing. Once you now in a partnership, in a mentorship relationship, it's no longer professional, whereby I have to keep this distance between me and this person because of I know better and they know less. So no, it has to be a friendship, because we are starting this mentorship partnership for something that is going to exist in the long run. So it's nice to see on my side when I get mentors that helped me 5 years ago, seeing the progress that I'm making now, and they're currently clapping hands saying that, wow, you're doing this, you're doing great. That is built through that empathic connection. It's long lasting. So that's how you can build cultural intelligence, by making that mentorship partner a friend, someone that you can also share your stories to, in terms of, this is what I'm doing right now, this is what you're achieving as a mentor. Sharing those types of stories is very inspiring and keeps you in a not a two-way relationship, not a one-way relationship whereby you're only just listening to what they have to say, what your other mentorship partner has to say to you, and there's nothing shared on your space. So that's how it is. Yeah.
So I'm getting authenticity, I'm getting keep it real, keep it raw, for it to evolve into sort of a meaningful exchange that extends way beyond the initial partnership of that mentor exchange. So that's really great. I'm going to hand over to Kara to say, what is this term cultural intelligence anyway, right? We've
Yeah.
got social intelligence, we've got emotional intelligence. Maybe let's divert that a bit more in that direction with you to respond. What exactly is your view on cultural intelligence, and how
Yeah.
would you show up with this?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, there's different understandings and there's room for interpretation, and so yeah, it's quite a term to touch on. But I think true to me, I'll speak on my own experiences. So for me, the things that come up to be I don't know if culturally intelligent is the right way, but I think to be sensitive and I think aware of the space that you're in and how to make sure that you are people speak about like inclusive and diversity, but for me I'm like, okay, but what does that look like? Like, people can say the nice words, but what does it look like? And what I've seen is exposure and curiosity is so critical in really learning those values out. So I'll give you an example. For us, it's really important that we are very intentional in who we surround ourselves with, and ensuring that there is a diverse group of people that run this organization, because we don't want to have the same of the same, because it limits our perspectives, it limits our creativity, it limits how far we can go with our conversations. And at the end of the day, we represent and fight for young South Africans who are exceptionally diverse. So our organization needs to be representative of those we impact. And so exposure is really important. So if you are willing to, if you're wanting to mentor different individuals, no matter their cultural circumstances or their backgrounds or their this, you need to also be comfortable showing up in spaces where there are people that are not like you. And you can still hold a conversation and you can still look to connect. So I think in your everyday living, being exposed to the fact that we have beautiful diversity and enjoy it. But then at the same time, be curious and honest that I don't know everything because I'm not in those spaces all the time, or my family functions differently, our traditions are different, our belief systems are different, but I'm going to ask you questions about yours because I'm genuinely curious. And I think asking the question and how you honor it and how you show up and respect it is what makes people feel really heard and cared for and valued. And I can give you an example of something that happened to our team recently. So one of our team members, her mom passed away really suddenly, and that was really difficult. Usually, you're like, this horrible thing happens, and then as a team, you put flowers and a card together, and you send it to the family and say, our condolences, we're thinking of you, we're there for you. But instead, our team came back and said, actually, part of how their family deals with grief is they have a lot of church meetings. So for the next week, there's different communities members that are going to be going to her house and her family's house, and they host like prayer meetings and memorial services, and that costs a lot of money. They need coffee and tea for the guests. They need to take care of the people. So instead, we put a very different package together, and team members showed up at prayer meetings in her home. We put together like a care parcel so that there was coffee and tea and sugar and milk to host these events, because that's what really mattered for her. And that's what really said, we see you, value you, we care about you, we're here for you. And so I think you can transfer that over into any connection, whether it's a mentorship relationship or just connecting with people generally, is be curious as to who they are and show up in that way and respect their traditions. But while I say that, at the same time, I would be very cognizant or mindful that we ourselves shouldn't use our culture as an excuse to be insensitive to anyone else. And it shouldn't be something that is allowed to be exploited. Because in the same breath, we've also had instances where someone made a comment and it offended another person. It was like, man, that's just my humor. I was just joking. No. Like, we have a standard way of connecting with one another. We have organizational or team values and beliefs, and at the end of the day, that's what you honor, and it's that mutual respect. So for me, I think sometimes people can use it as, but that's my culture, and it's a way to kind of mask insensitivity or abuse. And I think you need to be very cognizant of it, that we don't get to hide behind that, because at the end of the day, you get to have mutual respect no matter the cultural background that you're from. I think those are things that you need to see the shadow and the light of cultural intelligence.
Yes. Beautifully explained. I think for those that are listening in, I love that you brought in a practical example, even though it wasn't a mentoring exchange, but that is absolutely what we need to be cognizant of. And it requires a certain level of consciousness to be able to step into understanding. Again, it comes back to understanding your own light and your own dark, for you to be able to show up in the way that's needed for that particular person in that particular context. And what I'm also hearing as a theme coming through here is that we need to be embodying cultural intelligence, being the embodiment of it. We keep saying, as you say, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I am so tired of those words myself, because it's not about giving people a seat at the table. It's about giving them a voice and making them feel heard, understood, and acknowledged. And the same applies for in a partnership for mentoring. Both parties need to feel heard, understood, and acknowledged with the cultural nuances that are underpinned by that partnership. Otherwise, it's very difficult, and both need to almost contract up front and say, you know what, if there is an awkwardness, we're going to contract up front that we are going to be open and transparent and call it out. Because that's the other thing that's not happening. What I'm hearing you say is, let's call each other out in an empathetic way, but in a way that is going to not continue the trend or the behavior, because we want to drive behavior change. that is sustainable for that partnership to flourish in the end, right? So, lady and gentlemen, I told you this time is going to go by fast. We have 10 minutes remaining in our time here together. So, Nayeko, how are you feeling now when we said this is only an hour, right?
It's actually an hour so long.
Time is flying.
So, we have 10 minutes, and I doubt that we're going to get through everything, right? But let's maybe dabble into some of your success stories where cultural understanding significantly impacted a mentorship outcome. So, yeah, I want us to be a bit more specific. And I think, Cara, you touched on in the beginning of our conversation where there was success in that partnership. Maybe you want to touch on how you paid it forward or think about, I'm going to go to Nyeko first now, but think about this in the context of that success of that early experience for you, Cara. How have you paid it forward to continue the success rate of that cultural complementary partnership that you have now got in whichever environment you're doing so? Nyeko, so maybe if you can share your success stories of cultural understanding, practical
My
examples.
practical examples of the cultural understandings. So I would, explain it in a way whereby I was benefiting as a mentee or a mentorship partner. Someone was being mentored, and I had a very big success when my mentor was understanding where I'm coming from, uh, understanding my challenges as a mentorship partner, someone who who doesn't have a lot of resources like them, but they would make time and even make an effort sometimes to come and pick me up so that we can meet up for coffee. And that was very great because that now led me to have an understanding in terms of when someone really wants to help you, they will make the time and they will even make the effort. But it was because we had that connection as well. Having a connection with the mentor is very, very important. Once that mentorship connection is it's set, obviously you would need to be vulnerable first before that can be established. You would need to be open in terms of your challenges, where you are, where you want to go. And if your mentor is interested in helping you to get there, they're going to make the effort. And obviously I had to show up with consistency, making sure that the other times when I can show up, I do show up on time. Or even get there earlier before they can even get there, on our meeting spot. And that also showed them that okay, this guy is very motivated and dedicated to what he's trying to achieve. So if I do not show up, uh, then it's a problem. Then I do understand that, what, I am going to go and assist this person and make them, help them to show up and continue this journey that they have started. And that was through understanding where I'm coming from, understanding my background and where I was. So yeah, it's about emotional intelligence, I guess. Yeah,
Yes,
as
yes.
Winston would say, it is.
Winston's comment says it all, right?
It
It's
is.
upset.
It is. Yeah, it is
Thank
emotional
you for that
intelligence at the end of
wise
the day.
comment there.
Mm.
Okay, so thank you for sharing that. I want to get at least one more question in, so I want to quickly go to Cara in terms of her response, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Okay, I'll try to give it short and sweet. So I think I'll also switch up a bit and share an example of when I was being mentored. So back in my early career, my mom had gone through a really messy divorce, and because of that, we were in, our financial circumstances were worse than ever, and she needed to relocate for a job, and our family needed to split up, and so I was couch hopping for a while, and that was really difficult because I'm very close to my family, and so being away and split from my siblings, split from my mom during very young professional days was very difficult for me. And I was struggling to show up for work. I was really struggling with my mental health. I wasn't myself. And my mentor was able to identify this, to be like, you know what, I'm not seeing Cara at her best, but I'm not going to approach it as she is in this moment. I'm going to look at her holistically. And what do I know about her holistically and her circumstances and what is going on? And he was, in his wisdom, he was also able to pick up to say, she's going through things that I'm not the best equipped to handle, but I am going to connect her to someone else that's better suited. And so through his support and guidance, I was able to get in touch with the psychologist, who I would see for a few sessions, and I was able to like come out of the space that I was in, and I was able to like really, my career took off after that because there was a different level of resilience and grit. And I went on to work with World Health Organization in City of Cape Town and do these amazing projects, even though my family situation hadn't changed and I was still missing them and we were still separated. But the resilience and that knowing, that belief that it doesn't matter if you fail, and it doesn't matter if you're making mistakes, and it doesn't matter if everything is not okay, someone still has your back, and they don't need to get everything about what you're going through, but if they're willing to connect you with someone that might understand better, that makes all the difference. And so for me, success in a mentorship relationship is not thinking you need to have all the answers for this mentor. It's really egocentric. It's not going to work. Forget about that sentiment. But just that you're willing to show up and try to help them navigate. And sometimes that even means referring them to other people, other professionals, other peers that might be able to hold them in that space for that moment a bit better. So for me, I think that is something that really stood out to me, and I think really helped my career long term.
Fantastic. So I take out of that thing that you've just said is that when we are actively listening in that exchange and that partnership, we will both know when it's time to say this is no more a match and we need to move on. Or the person needs to be able to then say, well, let me find you a more suitable match because I cannot hold this space for you any longer. That's
Not
what I got out of that.
So not so much that it's no longer a match. I think it's about acknowledging your own limitations and being willing to call in reinforcements, because we still continue to mentor. Like, he was still my mentor for many years up until when he passed away a couple of years ago. He stayed in my life, a really important part of my life. So our mentorship relationship lasted over the span of 6 years. It was just in certain moments he knew when to call in reinforcements, and I think that's really important. As a mentor, know that you need to apply discernment on when to call reinforcement, because you care about that person that you're mentoring and you want to surround them with a team that's going to help set them up for success. So you're willing to tap into your own social capital and your own networks to get that team together. It doesn't just have to be you.
Beautiful. So we only have about 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes left. So I don't think I'm going to dabble into a question as such. I'm really going to hand it over to the two of you to say what has been, or what would you say would be possible ways then to make an exchange effective, because there's many mentorship programs around. And, I feel that from my experience working with SIBA, all those years ago and even now, and how things have evolved in terms of technology, the one thing is that they don't just have words on walls, the wow factor on walls. They truly embody and are purposefully and values aligned in making sure that this exchange drives the right impact within the entrepreneurial landscape, so that paying it forward continues. What would you say are other ways to effectively take this whole diversity cultural influence to master it and make it more effective within this mentoring space?
I believe that platforms like these are very helpful. Sharing the information that we've just shared today, the experiences that we've had in our past or in our mentorship experiences, is something that can also guide someone who is interested in getting a mentor or becoming a mentor to someone. It gives someone some inspiration and some guidance in terms of how to navigate cultural diversity. And I also believe that some things in writing would be good, in terms of maybe writing articles, a short book or ebook about cultural diversity in mentorship, and also, redefining mentorship as not only a professional or guiding relationship, but as guiding someone that you care about, because you need to care about someone that you are giving your time to. So with that, I think that's how we can improve the cultural diversity in mentorship.
Nyeko, I'm going to make that call to action. Maybe I'm going to put that out to you. Would you like to be part of putting a resource like that together with the help of ChatGPT, but also your own lived experience? Because I know most people use ChatGPT.
Yes, I will.
And we certainly can. So let's get in touch with Tanya and our team. And there definitely are training resources that are available. But what I love that you're saying is let's make this particular subject matter part of that, so that people are better equipped to have that exchange better and handle it better going forward.
Yes.
Over to you, Cara, before we say goodbye to our lovely guests that have been here with us.
Cool. Let me again try to keep it short and sweet. So I think from my experience, what I would advise is there are lots of platforms to connect, and sometimes it can become quite overwhelming. So I think just find the one that works for you. I strongly recommend being mentored and being willing to mentor someone else. But in saying that, be flexible and be willing to be creative and innovative about what mentorship looks like. I think it doesn't have to be this structured, regular commitment. It doesn't have to be in person. It doesn't have to be once a month. It doesn't have to be for an hour. It can be whatever you have committed it to be. If you have 15 minutes to speak to someone and it's a different person every few weeks, cool. When I started my role as the CEO, I knew that there was a lot I didn't know, and you don't know what you don't know. So I committed on once a month I was going to do a 35-minute coffee with someone who was smarter than me across different industries, and I consider them mentors. I can reach out to them at any point, but it was just about that quick, fast connection. Tell me, like, how do you do what you do? What keeps you motivated? What is your daily routine? How do you motivate your team? How do you connect? How do you handle conflict? And it wasn't about their industry. It was about their approach to their team, the work they did, their leadership. And they all had different perspectives. And that was how I was feeding myself while having a regular mentor. And you can be that too. If you only have a little bit of time, you can't commit to a long-term thing, that's still okay. I think be honest with what you can commit to, and that be okay that it doesn't look like everyone else's. So for me, I would just encourage creativity and flexibility around it, and that it can be not conventional. It can be unconventional, right? Like for me, mentorship shouldn't fit inside anyone's norms or preconceived ideas. It's how you choose to connect with those people. So yeah, that's it from me.
So the same call to action I'm going to extend to you. Maybe we could work together on how do we make it more innovative and get creative around it. So on that note, I just want to say absolutely wonderful to have held the space here together with the two of you and bringing your wisdom, your humility, your deep empathy. In fact, I feel a radical empathy from both of you in terms of how you show up either as being mentored, but equally how you show up and be accountable when you are being mentored. So thank you for that. For those that do want to get in touch with us, Cyber Ignition Academy's program, please, we will put some of the information on the post that you would have seen on LinkedIn or on Instagram. And do get in touch with either myself or Tanya, and we'll put her details as well in terms of who handles the program for our mentoring. So without further ado, thank you for those that have been here. Jackie, Siba, Gifts on Third, Zolani, Avril. There's been a few people on Instagram. I've been trying to type in between. We appreciate and value your time here investing with us. And do not hesitate to sign up to become a mentor. And if you're searching to be mentored, please connect with us as well on that.
Yeah.
Both of you can stay on while I end this live. I just want to do a short debrief as I always do with all my guests. But thank you again. And if you want to say goodbye to the guests, I'm going to hand over to you before I end the live.
Bye, guys. Thanks for joining.
Bye. Thanks for joining. Cheers.
Okay, I'll end